Hey, in this video we're going to sort out a couple of bugs. We're going to stop our enemies sliding indefinitely when we bash into them. That's a bug in my game. I'm also going to solve a problem where when we switch to and from direct mode, i.e. between keyboard and mouse and the gamepad, that our character is returning to a previous location. I'm going to have a tidy up of my code, rename some variables, and then also we're going to see but not fix yet a bug with the cursor drifting, which happens sometimes. A bit hard to reproduce, but let's see all about that in the video. Let's start this simple tidy up video by going to our code and looking for any to-do items like this that we have outstanding. In Visual Studio you can use the View Task List tool for that, and it looks for these to-do strings, or you could just do a search. So what have we got? We've got the first one is in camera-raycaster.cs. We're asking the question, or I wrote a comment, should we be finding the main camera on awake rather than start? Well, it's working, so no, let's remove that note, save the file. And then another one is inside the playermovement.cs. We have this is in direct mode Boolean member variable. We said consider making it static. Let's just reconsider that at the time if we need it to be global scope for any reason, i.e. static member. So let's get rid of that. So that's all the to-dos done. Very simple. Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is fixing the bug when changing back into indirect mode. What does that mean? Let me show you the bug and the reproduction conditions, and then we'll squish that there bug. So the bug is this. Let's imagine I'm in indirect mode, the default starting mode, and I click the corner of this cube, so my player moves there. Now I'm going to hit G to go into direct mode, and now I'm going to use the keyboard to move away from the corner of that cube, or the gamepad. This is gamepad mode now. Now, if I hit G again to go back into the mouse movement mode, watch what happens. He runs back to the corner of that cube, i.e. the last place I ever clicked. Why? That's obviously a bug, it's undesirable, so let's look in player movement and see why that might happen. Well, this current click target member variable, it's declared at the start of the class here as a member variable. It's set on start so that this type of behavior doesn't happen on start. The idea here is that we make sure that the character doesn't move when the game starts. Otherwise, he'd move to the origin, wouldn't he? Because this vector3 would be initialized automatically to a null as an empty vector 0, 0, 0. So we don't want him running to 0, 0, 0. So we do this on start. Let's look where else we mutate the value of current click target. Inside playermovement.cs. The only other place is when we actually click on a walkable layer. This is a read down below. So the only other right is here where we click on a walkable layer. And we never change that. So the problem is that we click on walkable, that member variable gets set, we go off into gamepad mode, and when we come back again, the current click target is still that. So can you think of a simple fix for that? If you want a little challenge, pause the video and fix that bug now. Otherwise, I'm just going to go in and do it. It's relatively simple. Or you can wait till the challenge at the end, which will be a general tidy-up challenge. Well, what we're going to do is we're just going to set the current click target. The moment that we toggle, we're going to say current click target equals transform.position. And we're just going to clear the click target. Okay, and what that will do, oh, I didn't mean to select everything. Clear the click target up here just when we toggle with the G key. So now what should happen is that bug should have gone. We click on the corner of the cube. We go to G for direct mode, we use the keys or the gamepad, we move away, we click G again, and we're back into cursor mode, but he does not run back to that point, the last clicked point. Fantastic. So that's fixed, just with that simple line I've got highlighted on the screen there in my playermovement.cs. There are other ways to do this, but that's a reasonable one. Now we have a slippery enemy bug. What does that mean? Well, let's just go run into an enemy. You may not have this issue, but if I move towards this enemy and hit him, if I actually hit him, look, he goes flying off and squishing off. How silly, sliding away. Very funny, and actually a few funny bugs are good because they can lead to extra creativity. But in this case, let's just knock this one on the head. We select our enemy prefab, go down to the capsule collider. In my case, I have 0 friction as the physics material. If I make max friction, I'll test that it worked, and if it did work, I'll apply it back to the prefab. So I don't seem to be able to do that. I can push him along and we can decide about whether that's desirable later, but at least he doesn't go flying off and continuing off. So I'll apply that back to the prefab, and that's that little bug squished. So that's cool. Now, are we going to fix the bug with the cursor? People are reporting a bug with the cursor. What's that about? The answer is no, we're not going to fix the bug with the cursor in this video, but I'm going to introduce it and narrow it down and work out what it is. Well, firstly, my cursor affordances have disappeared. Don't know why, but let's fix that issue. So I'm going to go to my camera arm. Remembering I'm working on an instance here, I'm going to make sure that all of my target cursors, the PSD files, are of texture type cursor here. That's important. I'm also going to make sure that the maximum size is 32 under the override for PC, Mac and Linux standalone. Why does it say PC, Mac and Linux standalone? Because that's what I've currently got set up in my build settings. So if you're making your game for mobile, you may have a different build target, and then you'll get a different different piece of information here on the right. But that's where it depends upon. Depends on the build settings. We want to use 32 by 32 for a cursor. We didn't do that before, so I'm going to set my cursors to 32. I'm also going to get rid of the cursor hotspot values 96 and 96 in my case and apply that back to the prefab, reconnect the cursors, and then that's what I need to do to get my cursors working. Apply this all back to the prefab, and let's just see how cursors work now. Yeah, and they seem to switch in the right place as well. That's good. All right, so the takeaway from that is that if you set your cursor size to 32 by 32, then you're going to need to change your cursor hotspot values to 0. And in fact, while we're at it, why don't we set the default cursor hotspot values in code as well to 0, 0, so that it never comes up as 96, 96 again. Why 96, 96? I think that's because the size of the PSD file was meaning that we needed a 96 by 96 offset to get into the right place, and I found that by empirical testing, but it's much better to just force these to 32 pixel size, and then we don't need an offset. You find that just, when you use it, it just gives the right feeling. Okay, so that's cool. I want to tell you one other thing about the cursor affordance. In case you're having problems with it for any reason, is this cursor mode.auto inside cursor-affordance.cs. You also have a force software. For some people, you may need to use force software to get it working properly. Auto will tend to default to hardware rendering of the cursor. That's just another hint if you're having any software, any rendering problems with your cursor. But that is not the main ticket item. The main ticket item is that my cursor affordances are working, but look at this. Some of the time, you see that drift? I've got my hand off the mouse now, and the cursor is drifting on its own. Now, people have been reporting this. I've reproduced it, Rick's reproduced it, other students have reproduced it. What on earth is going on? So, the first thing you can do with this type of problem is you can say, well, which game object or which component is causing the problem? Well, we can probably guess it's the cursor affordance script, because that seems to be when it started happening since. And indeed, if you disable the cursor affordance script, certainly I cannot make that happen again. But if I re-enable the cursor affordance script, then I start to get the drift again. All right, now it doesn't happen all the time, and it's a particular type of movement, so you need to do it enough to really convince yourself. But I'm absolutely not getting it here, and I turn cursor affordance back on, and it's there you go, comes back really quickly. So if you do that enough times, you'll convince yourself that it is the cursor affordance script that's causing the problem. So then the question is, what is it about the cursor affordance script that's causing the problem? Well, it's not doing much if you look at it. Every late update, it's just switching based on the current value of the camera raycaster's layer hit, which is the getter that we wrote. And it's setting the cursor, but it's doing this every single frame. So if it's the fact that it's setting the cursor every frame, then commenting out this line where we set the cursor when we're walkable should solve the problem when we're over walkable, but not when we're over something tagged enemy. Let's see. So over walkable, how's the problem now? Well, I've managed to go off the screen to the point of unknown. Let me just come to the left. So it's never going to switch back to walkable now, because we've commented out the line of code that does that. But look, as soon as I go over an enemy, you see it drift there? So what that tells me is that it is the fact that we are setting the cursor every frame. Now, I don't know why Unity's bugging out there, but it does raise an interesting architectural question as to, do we actually really want the camera raycaster setting this layer hit value inside itself every frame, and then independently, every single frame, asking what the value of that is from the cursor affordances, and potentially from other scripts as well? We could start having a lot of calls to this getter, this layer hit, saying, well, what's the layer hit? I would actually rather do this a completely different way. I only care about a change in the layer hit. I don't care about asking the layer hit every single frame. I want to be notified. Rather than late update and doing this every frame, I want something like on layer change or on cursor layer change. But how do we do that? Interesting. Well, we're not going to solve it in this video. We're going to solve it in the next video, where I'm going to talk to you about a very useful and common pattern called the observer pattern. And in the meantime, I've got a challenge for you. Tidy your house. Go ahead, fix or document any known bugs you have in your code. ensure all your to-do comments are either done or at least looked at and decided upon. Check for any required components. That's something else that I would recommend you do. What I mean by that is if the, for example, cursor affordance requires a camera raycaster, you can use the require component annotation like this to make sure that if you ever add a cursor affordance component to something, like for instance the main camera here, that it would add a camera raycaster with it. So what that allows you to do is it allows you to make sure that whenever you add a component, all of the required components come along with it. So there's a tip for you about tidying up and making things more exportable. Also, get your folder structure how you want it if you haven't done that already, and just check in general that your naming conventions are good. So just have a quick look through your code files, check against that checklist, and I will see you in a moment. Okay, welcome back. So the only thing there that I need to do is the required components. So we're going to say require component and then type of, and then we require a camera raycaster. Like so. Now I suspect that I've got that syntax a little bit wrong. Type of, no, it should be okay. Require component, open brackets, that's the problem. Require component, type of camera raycaster. Now that won't change the way that it runs, but if you ever added a cursor affordance script to a camera again, it would bring the camera raycaster with it, and as it's required, that's a sensible thing to do. All right, so that was that. Now, the other thing was talking about consistency of naming, and the only thing I don't like is that we have some M underscores in here. So in player movement.cs, this is a hangover from copying code from the engine, or from Unity's standard assets. So rather than that, I'm just going to call this third person character, and I'm going to look for M underscore elsewhere in this file. Here you go, M underscore cam forward. Well, let's just call that camera forward, but be careful to use Control R for the rename tool, Control R twice in Visual Studio. We also have an M underscore move here. I'm just going to rename that movement. Simple as that. Okay. And that's fine. I'm going to do a search for M underscore in the current project. So you may want to bring up your solution. Now, where is that solution window? View, Solution Explorer. Make sure you're in the correct thing, which is Combat Movement C# here. So you can right-click and scope to this. This takes us just to our project, Combat Movement, whatever you've called it. I can then search in the current project for M underscore. And we have a few. In the camera raycaster, we've also got these M underscore hit things here. Let me see. Do we want it to be called M underscore hit in the raycast hit? Not really. I want it to be called just simply raycast hit. So I'm going to rename that to raycast hit. Layer hit. Well, no, I want it to be called layer hit. But then we conflict with where we call layer hit. So let's go and find the caller, or the place that that calls layer hit, which is the player movement, or the cursor affordances, both of those. Yeah, here you go. So we got layer hit, camera raycaster dot current layer hit. Let's just do that, current layer hit. So I'm just renaming things so that they make more sense to me. Current layer hit. Where else have we got M underscore? Yeah, nowhere else. That's good. And that also, this current layer hit business just acknowledges that it's the last version that the camera raycaster kept a copy of in its layer hit variable. Okay, cool. Let's go and just check everything runs, and then that's my tidy up done. Layer hit is inaccessible due to its protection level, so there's somewhere else that called that current layer hit, and that's here, current layer hit in the player movement. Again, I'm just showing you an example of how to make all your stuff consistent, and yes, it's a hassle, yes, it's a pain, but it's worth it. Cool. All right, so it's all working. That's all good news. The guy doesn't move out the way. Well, he doesn't keep sliding. He does move out the way. We can stop that later when we get to enemy hits. We don't have our bug with regards to switching in and out of direct mode. The only thing that remains is this weird cursor travel bug, which we are going to deal with once we understand the observer pattern and delegates. So I'll see you soon.